Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Welcome back, everybody. We do apologize for the little bit of time delay. We're trying some new things, and as we continue to grow and improve, sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error, but that's okay. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us tonight. It is Monday night, so obviously we are talking defense, but we're gonna have some fun tonight. You know, it's Monday Mock Mania. I don't know. Everybody's got their fun play on Monday and mock and all that other craziness. So we've got our version. Tonight we're going to do a SuperFlex IDP mock. We're going to try to go as quickly as we can through 3 rounds so you can get some IDP, get some offense, get defense, all that fun stuff. So without further ado, I'm joined by my usual suspects, my partners in crime. Craig Reith, how you doing tonight, sir? And where can people find you at?
I am doing well. It's always fun to try out new stuff, new format, new visuals. It's beautiful. You can find me on Discord. I'm active there. I'm sort of active on Twitter. If you actually want my real opinion, you have to ask for it. And then tag me if you want to find me on Facebook, because I do not constantly peruse that, but I am there as well. How was your Monday, Paul?
Work was not very fun, but hey, we're having some technical issues, but we're going to make it through in the end, just like Michigan hoops and unlike Ohio State hoops, we'll come through for you in the end, when there's problems. Brad, how was your Monday besides the last 45 minutes of heading through software and sounding like the Sprint man? Please speak now.
Yeah, definitely always fun doing new things. Comes with its own adventures. I enjoyed Monday. Monday was good. Worked on rookiedraftguide.com, so hopefully all of our Patreons and all the folks that are stopping by there and enjoying the content we've been producing will continue to get even more. We're working hard trying to give new and creative ways to help you get value in the Rookie Draft Guide site. And I also want to promote RotoHeat.com. The guys over there have been pumping out articles like crazy, staying up on top of the news, the notes from fantasy perspective as well. I've even been kicking in some help there as well, trying to make sure we keep you guys up to date with all the great news that's been coming out. Free agency, obviously, it's going to quiet down a little bit. Week 2 is a little bit slower than week 1. But we do, since last week's show, we've got plenty to talk about. So, Craig, why don't you give us some news and notes, and we'll each kind of give our fantasy ideas if any of them actually are relevant for our IDP faithful.
Yeah, for our quick hits here, we got a few. Takk McKinley signed with Cleveland. Keanu Neal went to Dallas. I'm liking that one. Sheldon Rankins went to fortify that Jets defensive line. The recently released Kyle Fuller reunited with Fangio in Denver. Brad is loving that Michael Brockers trade to Detroit for that 7th-round pick, I'm sure. Justin Simmons got a really nice extension in Denver as well, with the addition of Fuller. That's looking like a revamped secondary. And then today, Adoree Jackson signed a big deal. I don't have all the details of the breakdown, but with the Giants, which is looking like if healthy this year, even way more intimidating defensive backfield than we anticipated in 2020. So, again, Keanu Neal, I really like. There's been scuttlebutt about him playing linebacker. I don't think that's going to happen. Dan Quinn really doesn't have a history of a whole lot of that sort of stuff happening. But what are your thoughts on any of those, Paul?
Neal, from a fantasy perspective, should be fine because I agree with you. He should play actual safety, but he's not going to be in center field much just because of limited skill set and injury history. Takk just is what he is. He's just basically a name right now. Fuller, I really liked. He still has it, just they decided they needed money for other positions. Yeah, he's almost 30 or is going to be 30 this year, but he can still play. Brockers is what he is right now. He's just old and bottom 3rd, but he starts for you. Simmons is nice. He earned that money. We'll see how long he sticks there. As far as being like top 5 safety. The moves that concerned me though were Rankins and Jackson. Rankins not so much because they need some ceiling, but when you see that Jackson ended up with 3 years and 39 million, I mean the state of New York hasn't blown money like that since they, it was the 6th trial for Gotti. I mean they're just throwing money out the window. There it is. You
There
get
we
one for
go.
the show. He's just average, and they gave him lots of money. So I just don't know how much return they're going to have from that. Was there anything that stuck out besides Neal for you? And obviously Simmons he stays, and he's not elite, but he's close enough.
Yeah, I think Neal and Simmons are the most fantasy relevant of the signings. Personally, on the Brockers trade, I love the value of the trade. We extended him, so he'll be there helping our defensive line through the rebuild. But it's not fantasy relevant per se. I don't think unless Deshaun Hand takes a step forward, unless Okwara and his brother continue to take a step forward. I don't know that Brockers really can be fantasy relevant just yet. I definitely am of the mindset that the safeties are definitely fantasy relevant. I've liked Simmons for a couple seasons now, and he definitely has done an excellent job. I think Keanu Neal in Dallas will be really fun too, just because those guys are going to be flying all over the field between him and Jalen Smith. If they can beef up that defensive line and really give them something to work with there. But fantasy relevant wise, the safeties are really it for me. Adoree Jackson could potentially be fantasy relevant if you're in a cornerback specific, but we'll see how that goes for sure. So tonight, those are the news and notes. We're going to jump into a rookie mock. So pretty straightforward. We're just going to go right in order, 3 picks. Because it's IDP show, we're not really going to jump into why the offensive guys the way they are. If you have questions, Discord, Facebook community, you feel free to ask away. We'll answer your questions. You can hit Kraig and I up on Twitter. We will gladly answer your questions that way. We're going to go Kraig 1, Paul 2, me 3, and just kind of bounce back and forth. And we're going to try to get these knocked out in the hour. So we're going to try to get 2-3 rounds because we want to get to the IDP point. We know that the first round of a SuperFlex rookie mock is not going to have IDP, and most of the second round probably won't either. So without further ado, Kraig, you can get us going.
Yeah, this will be nice and quick. Trevor Lawrence. Most people aren't going to dispute this. I know there's other people out there that have other people. That's fine. He's the general consensus one in SuperFlex League. So that's what I'm going with. Paul?
Since we're just screwing around in the first round, I'm going to take a tight end and go Justin Fields.
That's probably where Fields goes in most of these still. So.
Yep. At that
Maybe
position also.
Yeah, maybe not the position. But anyway, Brad, you're up
well,
third.
then I'll have to go Jamar Chase. As much as I like Zach Wilson, got to go Jamar Chase. Back to you, Kraig.
I like Trey Lance a little bit more than Zach Wilson. I have him in that same general area, so I'm going Trey Lance with the next one.
Zach Wilson if I picked 2nd or 5th, but yeah, that's just not going to happen in real life, so we can screw around here. Zach Wilson.
All right, so next up, give me the running back. Give me Najee Harris. Back to you, Mr. Kraig.
I had him next up, and since you didn't take him, I'm taking my number 2 running back. I'm going Kenneth Gainwell. Paul?
Javonte Williams.
All right, then give me Jalen Waddle. Back to you, Kraig.
Rondale Moore is my pick.
I didn't realize that Elliott was on this show. 11.
Well, you were me last week, so switching it up.
That's right. We had a nice little argument in the car on the way home yesterday about that one. Rashod Bateman for me.
All right, so I'm gonna go Kyle Pitts then. Got to go that tight end.
I think he goes higher if this is an actual draft and we're not just screwing around.
Well, I'm drafting this about as realistically as I can, so team needs always plays into that, but I'm up, right, Brad?
Yes.
Devonta Smith.
I'll go with ETN here.
Is this the start of the second round now? Is that where we're at?
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
2-4.
12. Yeah, we are at 2-4.
Well, since this is Superflex, I figured he'd probably go sooner than this, but I will go Mac Jones.
He was the guy that I was looking at just there. All right, so do you, Paulie?
Do I pull the trigger now? Is there a receiver I still really like on the board? This is going to be a team needs, and there's one tight end, one receiver, and all right, whatever. I'll break it. Micah Parsons. I'll break the
I had
seal.
I had him at 19 overall, so I was right there with you. It's basically, a quarterback that I like that no one else does, a tight end I like that some do, and then Parsons. So I hear you.
I mean, if you're someone who doesn't own their first, but they own a couple seconds, and you made the playoffs, and you say deserved it, yeah, this is about the range. If you own this selection because you earned the 1-4 selection, and you earned it the hard way, I'd be looking at other positions. But this feels about the range for him. And again, we're basically stopping a little bit to focus on where are the defensive assets and where do they slide in. It's not that I'm just hitting on what I want to. We'll talk about the defensive ones a little bit more here. He just seems really. He's the most surefire defensive asset that you can grab.
Yeah, and that's a tough thing. I have two defensive guys in my top 24, but it was like, okay, so maybe I have more. Like it's a tough one. I really was kind of going back and forth, so I'm right there with you. And I think depending on when your IDP league does its draft, this could change quite a bit. So if let's say safety 2, 3, 4, linebacker 2, 3, 4, guys that go to really favorable situations, I could see it kind of bump guys around a little bit because I've seen it happen in leagues in the past. But it's so hard I say this early, but we're a month from the draft at this point. It's an interesting spot we're in. I'm next up though. I'm gonna go Kyle Trask. I know it's a quarterback that nobody likes, but I do. And at this point, he's not on a team, and I still think he goes somewhere favorable and could become a starter sometime. Up to you, Mr. Kraig.
Yeah, I have really one more offensive player that I like before we get into the defensive players that I was looking at taking here. So I'm going to stick to my board that I put together earlier today, and I'm going to go Tylan Wallace. But this is sort of the range that, in leagues where we've talked about the scoring, which you can find on RotoHeat.com, that we've talked about that we're using for this. This is sort of that, early to mid. We're getting towards the later part of the second here, but Superflex pushes that down even more with these defensive guys. So this is probably about the range you're going to start to see just more of your defensive guys go. And if it was a down year, you'd probably have more of them earlier. But with how loaded this offensive class is, I feel you're seeing a lot more offense than you necessarily would in like a prior year.
Yep. All right, Paulie.
It's a I'm surprised you didn't select the guy that you drafted out of high school in one of our leagues, Brevin Jordan out of Miami. I will pick him next.
Yeah, I have him around this range too. It's one of those things with tight end where generally I feel, and I know we've talked about it, but I won't belabor it. You can get tight ends later cheaper, after a year or two of sitting when someone gets fed up with it.
Also, who are you selecting? Are you hoping that you draft first or hoping that you draft last? I mean, obviously you can hope to draft last, but be realistic.
Right.
All right, so next up, I'll go. Man, it's a tough one. I'll go Seth Williams here. We're getting dangerously close to the next IDP that I like, but there's still like 2 or 3 guys that I like more. Back to you, Mr. Kraig.
Is it? Oh, sorry. I will take a defensive player now. Zaven Collins is my next guy on the board. I know there's questions about the competition, sort of just that one really big year boom that he had, but seeing him play, the last time that we saw him play and just what he was able to put on the field, being all over and sort of just be that guy that can come off the edge, but he's also, I feel, a sure tackler and just really heady. He's my number 2 IDP at this point, so behind Parsons, who was taken.
That's an interesting. So as I was putting my board together for the show as well, I wrestled with that on the linebacker group, because we've talked about guys like Nick Bolton, who's kind of a tackle machine potentially. Zaven Collins has this, this freaky athletic ability that could be a really dynamic pass rusher off the edge, and it was so hard. Like I don't hate the option. Like I don't hate the pick. There's like so many players that could fit into that mold when it comes to. There's probably 3 or 4 linebackers that you could argue here. A couple of safeties you could argue here. Maybe 1 or 2 true defensive ends in 4-3. I don't hate the pick. I mean, it's hard to hate the pick because these guys, there's some talented defensive guys here. So don't knock it at all. What about you, Mr. Vale Boom?
I'm a little concerned he plays edge, and that might be a help, and it might be a hindrance depending on what 3-4 he ends up at. But I don't hate the selection. It's just I'd rather have a couple guys over him. Also, I'm not going to have a whole lot of chances to, because the score is 71-53 and the game ends. I'm going to select a winning Seminole and go Hamza Nasrallah because he kind of works here as the BPA. Sweet 16 right here. I just feel that out of the safeties, he's the most surefire to land in a spot where he gets a bunch of tackles. Obviously, if this is actual football, he's not the top safety and probably not the top 3 or 4. But from a fantasy perspective, you have a linebacker that's safety eligible, and you saw what happened with Chin last year. I'll select Hamza. Go Knowles.
Yeah. Well, that's like I said. I mean, when we were talking IDP, was it last season? Hamza was a guy, or Devi. I mean, Hamza's a guy I like, so I don't hate the pick here. So this is where my head was at as we were getting at the back end, beginning of the third, back end of the second, beginning of the third. There's guys like Michael Carter out there, Kadarius Toney, Freiermuth. There's still some guys that's like, okay, they feel like they're supposed to be second round picks. IDP, SuperFlex, all that. Like they feel like they're really at that point. So I wrestled with, where do I slot some of these other guys in? I'm gonna go with my next IDP guy for the sake of the conversation, but I'm gonna go Javon Holland. I like this safety group. I think there's probably 3 to 4, maybe even 5 that could be very fantasy relevant. Probably not year 1, but definitely within the first few years. So I'm going to go Javon Holland. I like him a lot. I think he's really dynamic, and I think he could become a really nice fantasy asset. Back to you, Mr. Kraig, and feel free to give your comment.
Yeah, so Holland I had right around this area. There's a few, generally my defensive guys are at that sort of end of the second round, start of the third round with the scoring, and I know we're a little bit beyond that here. Hamza is a guy that I have to see where he goes because I need to know that he's going to be playing as he should in the NFL. I just can't see him fitting in on any team. Holland, I could see just fitting in on any team. Like he could fit into a secondary and be productive on pretty much any team, even if it is, a Duggar situation that we're seeing now, where you might have to wait a year or two, or who knows with Belichick 4 years or something like that. So I had Holland, and I didn't have your boy, even though I do like him on my top 36 here tonight, Paul. So don't tomahawk chop me for that. But I am going to go with a pick for our buddy Rick, who's maybe listening. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I'm maybe butchering that, but I'm doing my best to get the pronunciations down instead of just reading them. He's my number 3 linebacker, and if you're sort of talking about possibly more traditional like Parsons, he might be the number 2. If you're talking about Zaven as an edge guy potentially. Extremely athletic, able to play all over the field, and sort of has that ability to match what you're seeing on the field to the sort of productivity and the numbers that you're seeing on like at pro days and things like that. So he's another guy that I think if you stick him in any defense, you could probably find a spot for him to be productive. And depending on landing spot, but I could see him being a day 1 starter somewhere. So I'm going to be going with him.
Yeah, I got tackling concerns with him, but he's got the athletic upside. He might slip in the first round, which if he is, he's on the field by week 6, 8 range at the latest. So here, I pick next. I was really hoping that the pastor was going to deliver us a Trey Sermon, but I guess I will have to.
That's my kind of joke. Well done.
What? So you like Sermon more than Carter? Not that this is an offensive show.
Rather easily. If this was an actual draft, I think he probably goes 5 to 6 selections higher. But I've been higher on Sermon the past 3 to 4 years than a lot of others. So, yeah.
I didn't have him in my 36 either on here.
So, going back to Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, my only question for him is he, do they put him as a weak side linebacker? If they do, I have a little bit of concern about his cap, kind of his ceiling for fantasy value. Obviously, we can't answer that question.
Right.
But that's kind of where my concern is. If a team gets him and he's only on the field for, 2 downs because they're in nickel package and he doesn't get on the field as a nickel guy. I mean, he's got the athletic ability to be so. The thing I would really love to see with the team is, do they consider him kind of the Isaiah Simmons role, where he's kind of doing some different things because he's so athletic? Can you have him on the field in various roles? Like, I would love that for his fantasy value, because you could sort of put him on the field as a safety a little bit, and I think that'd be really cool and interesting. So I love the player. I love the athletic profile. It's just hard to, like we've tried to kind of figure out where he goes, what his position is, some of that. So if they find a way to use him in various roles, I would be really excited about that, because I love the player. Okay, so you just delivered the worst Trey Sermon I've ever heard. So I'm going to go Michael Carter next, the running back that probably should have gone there. I like Trey Sermon. I just that injury concern is always going to be there. Or Michael Carter, at least I know he's kind of the gadgety PPR back. He may not be a true high value guy, but at least I know what I'm going to get out of him. He can run between the tackles and do those things. Obviously, we saw him run basically similar numbers last year to Javonte Williams, but I really like Carter, and this isn't a defensive show, so we'll go back to you, Mr. Kraig.
This probably will not be the top defensive lineman in almost any draft, but I'm going to go with a guy that I feel has a really great floor and I think has a high chance to see the field right away. He's my top defensive lineman, which is Carlos Basham Jr. He was on the header for tonight's show. I sort of see him right now as a jack of all trades and maybe not a master of none. But, if you're having a guy like Rousseau that's just going to be a pass rusher, you can run into those things where he's on the field, and if he doesn't get to the quarterback and you're playing him, you're not getting points. Whereas Basham, I see him on the field to start. He's going to be getting you tackles. He's proficient enough, especially if there's other people around him, that he is going to get to the quarterback, tackles for a loss, things like that. So I do have him. This can change with landing spot. That's a caveat for any of these, but I have him as my top defensive lineman, and this is where I feel safe taking a guy like that. Paul?
Yeah, I like that selection. I think he ultimately ends up in the top 10 overall, and that will lock him into seeing the field. If he becomes defensive tackle or IL eligible, if you're playing on Flea Flicker, you can look half a round higher for him because he's going to be very, very highly sought after.
Yep.
So I'm up next. I will take D. Eskridge, receiver out of one of the directional. I actually don't remember
It's
which
Western,
one.
Western Michigan.
Western, yeah,
Broncos
Western,
of
Eastern,
Michigan.
Southern. Yeah, Western, Eastern, Northern, South, Canada. Somewhere in that range.
Yeah. I feel like I need to go with a defensive guy because I've literally only drafted one. But top guy on my board is still here, so I guess I got to take him. Pat Freiermuth, tight end, Penn State. I know tight ends will fall in SuperFlex, especially IDP, SuperFlex, all of this.
Yeah.
I do want to note, if you throw tight end premium in the mix, because some leagues, if you go this far, you just go all the way, and there's tight end premium and things like that. Tight ends are going to go much higher, and he probably slips into the early second at the earliest, or probably even at the latest, I would guess. He go early. So give me Freiermuth, and we're back to you, Mr. Reeve.
So I know where we're at. I've just been crossing people off as we've gone over them. What pick are we at here?
2-5, or I'm sorry, 3-5.
35. I wouldn't have. You mean 3-4 maybe? Because I don't have 3-5. Regardless, we're in that area. I'm going to take my top edge player. It's not the guy from Miami that everyone seems to be in love with. I'm going to go Jalen Phillips, who, if you're talking about the defensive end position, with Basham potentially being inside, outside, wherever. There's a few guys that I have in here, but he does have potential injury concerns, which, we'll see how the NFL reacts to that. And something I've been paying more attention to because it's bitten me before is when the NFL takes heed of something and drops where you go in the draft because of it. I should be paying more attention to it in drafts. So if he falls because they have concerns about that sort of stuff, he won't be going this high. But he's about as physically as gifted of a defensive end that you're going to get. He does need some refinement because he did not have a ton of playing time. But I did see better run defense, just overall skill compared to Rousseau, who to me really looked like a one-trick pony. Paul?
Who got selected after Holland?
No idea.
Was it Sermon? Or do we skip a pick? Do we skip the Kraig selection there?
I don't think so. He picked, didn't he pick Basham? Is that where he picked Basham at? Or was that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah? No, it's Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Oh. No, well, then I got to move all my stuff down. Jeremiah Kusa, ND, LB / safety. Okay, never mind. I screwed up. All right, so 3-7. Chaz Surratt probably doesn't have the floor that Bolton has, but if you're selecting this late, let's go for ceiling. Just athletic upside, but he's new at the position, just tackle monster. So Chaz Surratt.
Who would have thought that Chaz would have been drafted before Sage, even this time like a year ago?
Or even 2 months ago.
I mean, wasn't Chaz a quarterback coming into college? Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yes. Yeah, he started for a couple years.
So it's that's very telling for you offensive guys, for you Sage Surratt fans or truthers. His brother was a quarterback converted to linebacker and still is getting drafted before the wide receiver who's played wide receiver his whole career. Or, I mean,
He just shows more athletic upside at the position.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see Surratt being anything other than a below average split end. Surratt, if he ends up in the right spot, he's going to be the tackle machine that everyone looks for, at least for fantasy.
well, and I think the interesting conversation to have, kind of going back more so to Jalen Phillips that Kraig just picked, is, what's your flavor of end do you like? Because a guy like Kwity Paye, Jalen Phillips, you got Patrick Jones, you've got a lot of Quincy Roche, you've got a lot of these guys that are really potentially first, second round type prospects, depending on who you believe in when it comes to NFL draft. What's your flavor of end? Because I keep tossing around where to do Kwity Paye at. I mean, as a Michigan guy, I tend to bump Michigan guys further down my board just because of my Harbaugh bias at this point. But Kwity Paye, I mean, they keep mocking him to teams that are 4-3s, and if he goes and is a 4-3 edge or 4-3 end, come crashing down off the end, I'm really excited about those prospects. I love Jalen Phillips' athletic profile. I think between him and Quincy Roche, I think those are they're kind of neck and neck for me when it comes to, you could have them be either an 4-3 end or kind of a 3-4 outside linebacker. I mean, you could put him in a few various positions and they could be scheme flexible. For those teams that don't just run a pure 4-3 or 3-4, but they do elements of both, I think those two guys specifically are insanely intriguing for fantasy if that's where they go to. So all that being said, I actually am going to make a pick now, right? Because it's Paul's turn. Is it Paul's turn? No, he just picked. He picked Chaz.
He just went.
Let's go with another defensive guy. I'm going to go Trevin Morig. If you look at any of my IDP rosters, typically I'm loaded up on safeties. I mean, I just love drafting safeties for some reason.
Yeah.
Morig he was my favorite fantasy safety. I keep going back and forth between him, Holland, and Richie Grant as kind of who I like the most because I like all three of them. Morig is just a missile. I mean, that guy, I think he's my Tracy Walker. As a Lions fan, Tracy Walker is a guy I really like, but he also at the same aspect is a missile and gets hurt a lot. So that's my concern with Morig, which is why I wouldn't draft him any earlier than kind of late third into the fourth, kind of as a stash to see what happens. But I like Morig. I think he's a solid upside type of player that I'll throw. At this point in the draft, these guys are probably going on taxi squads potentially. So I would take a shot on him and feel comfortable with it. Back to you, Mr. Kraig. How do you feel about Morig, and what are you doing next?
Yeah, he's one of those guys, and I run into this in fantasy, and I don't know why or what exactly it is, where I just don't end up being as high on them, and I artificially push them down my board even more because there's other guys that I like more for whatever reason. And he's one of those guys where he is a really good player. He just, is like fourth, fifth list of the safeties that I like. And it's usually more pre-draft problem that I run into, and I'm cognizant of it, so I'm trying to fix it. Like I had Richie Grant ahead of him, who you discussed, him and Holland, I agree, are sort of in that grouping. But and for whatever reason, we talked about it last week. We won't continue that conversation about safeties all the way this week. But I like Andre Cisco as an NFL product better than him, whereas Morig is probably the better all-around player. But in terms of fantasy, if Cisco gets out there and he's on the field, I think he's just more of a ball hawk and a turnover guy, which in safeties, that's going to be your big plays if you're not getting consistent tackling. So it's sort of which one do you prefer, like you said, about flavor of guy. I don't have any issue with you taking him there. And I would go Richie Grant, but I do still have some offensive guys now in this little grouping before my next set of defensive guys. So I'm going to go with Dyami Brown as my next pick here. And I know, Paul, I don't think you were a huge fan of his.
Yeah,
I did listen to the show last week, but
yeah, I'm just not a fan of him. He doesn't have something that stands out for me. If I get proven wrong on that, happens a lot. It's okay. All right, so I'm up next. There's not really an offensive guy. I mean, if I were to go offense, it would be Amon-Ra, but no one's looking for an offensive selection
No
here.
Kadarius Toney.
Go Seminoles.
You had to. If that's all you get out of him, we got off lucky tonight, Brad. Where were you poking the bear on Thursday night last week? You were just sitting there back on your laurels, letting Paul and Joe have a pillow fight about wide receivers. You didn't poke the bear at all.
I wanted to make sure it was recorded evidence that two guys that run their mouth in the chats like they're going to do something do absolutely nothing when it comes to face-to-face. So maybe next time, but not this time. I was going to let them duke it out with their their soft pillows.
Strategery on your part. I got it.
All right.
Big brain time.
I'm gonna go with someone that we haven't mentioned on the
I
safety
was
show.
about to say, I hope you go with someone we haven't mentioned.
On the safety show, on all the other shows, we have not mentioned this guy. James Wiggins, safety out of Cincinnati. Huge height, weight, speed. He does have a couple issues tackling, but it's not horrible. And I think that ultimately someone selects him in probably the 3rd round, and they're going to put him on the field, and they're just going to let the growing pains happen with him. I like him a lot more than you guys, obviously, but Wiggins out of Cincinnati. How do you guys feel about him?
I'm going to pull up my notes, or at least I was trying to pull up my notes while you were talking.
Wow, that horrible about him.
Well,
Wow,
I don't
good.
remember, so I got to look to my notes.
Him.
I know I evaluated him.
Not applicable. I haven't dug into him yet.
He wasn't one of the 846 middle schoolers that you drafted 6 years ago, Brad?
I didn't draft him, that's for sure. Let's see here. So Wiggins, what is he? 6 foot 205. Let's see here. Oh, that's a good size. All right, so my biggest concern was I just didn't know what they do with him at safety. He seems to be potentially a ball hawk because he had 4 interceptions and getting second all ACC honors and what have you. So potential ball hawk, good size plus speed. Just not sure what safety position they put him in. And because I couldn't see exactly where I thought that he would fit, I just kind of let him sit in the nexus. So I don't really have anything super negative about him to say. So don't hate the pick. I mean, at this point, it's Richie Grant and then whatever else you like, so everybody's kind of got the guy that they might fall in love with at this point. But, again, at this point in an IDP draft, you're really starting to try to find, okay, where are the gems? Where's the stash guys? I mean, from the offensive side, you still got Hunter Long and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tony and Jarrett Patterson and Khalil Herbert and Kylan Hill, but it's not like guys that are sure things. You've got guys that have some sort of trait that could be appealing. And then from the defensive side, now it's pick your poison. Are you a Rousseau guy? Do you like that edge that's able to attack the quarterback and develop, but isn't really a very refined prospect? Do you go with Nick Bolton, the tackle machine that's probably not going to do anything more than just give you a bunch of tackles? That's kind of where you're at. Is it's like, all right, so what's your flavor? At this point, Wiggins is a fine pick because, hey, you got to go with the guy that you love, and if that's the guy you love, you take him. At this point, I have to go offense just because Kadarius Toney's still sitting there. I don't love this spot, though. So if this would be the spot in the draft where if somebody loved the pick, I would just look to get something in the future just because there's not something that I'm, like, super in love with. So give me Kadarius Toney just because I'll throw him on the taxi squad and see what happens. Mr. Kraig, back to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to have you come in on
Richie
Sunday.
Grant.
Yeah.
I mean, Richie Grant, we talked about, I feel like we're just repeating stuff from last week, and I don't want to be doing that because, we're trying to get through new information and comments. But Richie Grant was near the top of all of our lists, and, this is a fine spot to be taking him. So that's where I'm going.
That's a true story. It is a very fine spot to be taking him. Mr. Paul? You are up next.
I like him also, just like him more from an actual football perspective than fantasy. I think he plays more center field. I'll swing for another home run and probably strike out Dylan Moses. The linebacker, just athletic upside, but he's not smart. He's just not. So
Fair enough. Brad.
I mean,
Well,
he watches the receiver run right beyond him and just whoop, he doesn't do anything. Like, he's just not smart.
so look at Bama's linebackers. I don't know that I've seen them bring in a backer and truly develop him. Like the guys come in and they're super athletic and talented and they just make it through based on that. So it's hard to say, okay, if you get this guy with a really solid linebackers coach that can help him process what he's seeing, because when you watch him, you see him seeing the play happen as it's going by. And then you're like, okay, what was happening there? So if you get him with a linebackers coach, I think he could be, he could be the steal of the draft at the linebacker position because he can be a tackle machine. He is an athletic freak. He bounced back from injury just fine. Like I love the pick. And I wouldn't be afraid at this point to swing for that. I mean, and quite honestly, I wouldn't argue that he isn't worth, right behind Micah Parsons' value if he can put it all together. That's just a big question.
Definitely.
So, well done, swinging for the fences and hoping you hit a home run. So it's back to me. I'm gonna go K. Whitty Pay, defensive end from the University of Michigan. What can I tell you?
Why not?
Got to go with my homerism at some point in the draft. I love the player. I know Paul's mentioned he's got some concerns about ageism, but I'm not an ageist. I appreciate the talent. The situation for him is if he goes to a 4-3 team, I think that is a plus for him. If he goes to a 3-4 team and they put him on the end, I don't know how I feel about that. You have to check back on that one because I'm struggling with that one as I try to look at him in a 3-4 defense. I love him as a 4-3 edge. He's dynamic. He can get off. He uses his hands well. I think he has a pretty solid first step. There's a lot to like about him. So, give me K. Whitty Pay, defensive end, Mr. Kraig.
I am going to go with Kylan Hill. So I know I keep interspersing offensive guys, but this is what you're going to see in your real draft. It's not just going to be 15 offensive guys, 15 defensive guys. You're going to have it mixed around, not to be the buzzkill, but I like him in terms of the running backs here. It was him or Patterson. I kind of have those two neck and neck, and they're not the same guy clearly in what they bring, but I like both of them at the same general area. So Paul, it is to you.
Is this the last round that we're doing here?
It's getting close to 10:30, so I don't see any questions in the chat. I see a very active chat tonight, which is awesome, but I don't see any questions that we're going to bring up. So we can keep going a little bit, and we'll just cut it off at 10:30.
Fair enough. I was gonna say, yeah, I don't have a problem with Pay either. I mean, what scheme he ends up in and what he's eligible for, I don't know. He can play all spots on the line across the 3-4 and the 4-3. I don't hate that pick at all. Just if he plays tackle and you're playing defensive line eligible, yeesh. If you're playing interior line though, and you have to actually play one, I'll go Richard Nixon out of Iowa. Just really solid. Yeah, he's really good there. He just has a bunch of talent, and if you have to actually play the defensive tackle, he's pretty good.
I mean, Davey.
I'm vetoing this pick. I'm vetoing this pick.
Aww.
You get one per show. That's your second. The pick is ineligible and forfeited.
Well played.
Okay, Swanee.
That's right.
Paul. Yeah, I mean, if you're going defensive tackle specific, there's probably only one true defensive tackle to draft, and that's Nixon. And if you have a league where it's defensive tackle specific involved, he probably goes higher than this, I would think, because you're always looking for a really high-end defensive tackle, and he's probably it in this draft. I mean, it's hard to really get excited about what's behind him. I mean, there's some interesting guys, but nothing that you're like, okay, this is for sure thing. Nixon is a for sure thing at D tackle. I don't, he's, what is he, a 3 tech, and those guys are up the field attacking, and he's got a good first step. He's got some burst and explosiveness to him that, I mean, it's not a sexy position, but for IDP, the D tackle position, that is a sexy pick. I mean, he's really, really nice. And we're at the point.
We didn't
Oh, yeah,
decide
go ahead.
before the show if we're doing IL or tackle,
No,
or
yeah, it's just kind of.
eventually we're kind of throwing the names out here also.
Right. Yeah, and that's a tough thing, So in the wild west of IDP, there's just so many variations of league types, and you have to factor in your scoring, and you have to factor in your your lineups and your starters, and I mean there's a lot that goes into it. So anybody who does IDP, you guys are a rare breed of awesome that you just have to dive in. You have to really be prepared to do your homework. Obviously, rookiedraftguy.com will help you. And it's just tough. So we do our best to kind of give a high level view of, well, these guys kind of fit here, and if you have questions, again, Discord, Facebook community, I mean, that's where you get those questions answered. You hit us up and we work through it. This is kind of a blanketed, these are kind of where we see guys going. It's kind of having fun, but it may not hit your league perfect, so be careful. All right, so next up is me. I'll just go with an offensive guy because he's the next highest up on my board, and that's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, he could turn into something. Some people love him. I'm not the hugest Amon-Ra guy, but some people love him. All right, Kraig, we'll go.
Yeah, he lost a lot of value from being like a first to second round Devy asset to going. I even lost track here, somewhere mid fourth round.
He's past the third round at this point in a deep one.
He lost a lot of value.
All right, so we'll do one more selection for each of us, and then we'll close the show out. We'll have a little bit more fun, and you've gotten more than 3 rounds, but that's because we love you. All right, Kraig.
Since it's an IDP show, I'll go IDP. I'll go Nick Bolton. We talked about him, but I like him a lot, but he is more of an old school linebacker. He probably isn't going to go as high as I even like him. If I had to guess, into the third round probably is my current guess of where he'll go, just because I don't see him, being necessarily viewed as size-wise what teams want, or as good in coverage as they want from a lot of linebackers. But he's certainly a guy that I'm rooting for, and if he gets put in a good position, he could be extremely fantasy productive for you. So getting him in the 4th-ish round here could end up being a steal, very certainly down the road. Just probably not right away. Paul, your last pick.
I will select another individual that we did not discuss last week and probably should have. I'll take the other University of Cincy safety, Derrick Forest. He's got some speed concerns, but he'll hit you. And if you're slightly slow on the back end, it's almost what you're looking for from a fantasy perspective that teams will throw at him. Derrick Forest, he might not be drafted at all in your fantasy leagues, but there's not a lot of athletic height, weight, speed that you're looking for left. So situation's going to matter on the defensive side.
So you're telling people to see the forest for the trees?
Yes.
That's for you, Brad.
All these crappy puns and one-liners for the night. We might have to.
I take offense.
We have to
that.
rename this show the
Crappy.
ID Crap Show because you guys are giving us crappy puns.
Breaking my heart here.
Deliver your Trey sermon to us there, sir.
You're a dad. You're supposed to be liking these.
Maybe it's because I'm not delivering the puns. I'd probably laugh harder if they were my own puns.
That's probably.
I don't know. If a dad joke falls on deaf ears of another dad, is it really a dad joke?
Yes, because you hear it and you laugh inside.
Fair enough.
That's half the battle.
Notes on.
Last pick,
Well, so
Brad.
I'm looking at my notes on Forrest just real quick. Yeah. Um, versatile. Probably better closer to the line is what I wrote here. So I don't know, 6 foot, well over 200 pounds, does a lot of things that you like to see. It looks like he was pretty heavily involved. It would be interesting to see if two Cincinnati safeties get drafted. That would be something I don't know if it's ever happened. I don't know. Last pick, I'll go with the defensive guy. Obviously, we've talked about our non-love for Gregory Rousseau, but I think he's a raw enough talent that if somebody that can develop defensive end gets him, like I think of like a Mike Zimmer in Minnesota. He's gotten these kind of not no-name defensive ends, but guys that kind of went under the radar. The Daniil Hunters of the world worked with them, developed them, and they became something. I'd be okay with taking a shot on a guy like that. If he goes to a team like that, that would be great for his value. The issue with people is it's he wasn't productive for very long. It's the Wreath effect. He had 1 year of production and then he opted out, and you just don't see what happens. Like, we needed to see some development, and obviously we couldn't. So teams will overdraft him for the NFL just because of the freakish athlete and potential there. But I mean, that's for fantasy, it's just not gonna. I can't imagine people go crazy for him unless he goes super high in the NFL draft. So back end of the draft, throw him in my taxi squad. I'm not upset about it in the least.
If he goes in the first or second round of the NFL draft, he's probably realistically in the top 2 rounds. Someone's going to fall in love with him in fantasy just like someone did in the NFL, and he'll go much higher than this.
So
Yeah, there's about 4 or 5 athletes every year that I go, yeah, not interested in at all. But if he slides at the end of the 4th round and you can stash him on the taxi squad for a season, maybe even 2, depending on your league format. Yeah, we're late enough where, come on, Snake Eyes. Throw it out there and hope they
right,
come.
right. So all right, there you go, people. We pumped out as many IDP relevant mocked players that we could. We will inevitably do at least one more before the NFL draft. We want to make sure that we give you guys as clear a picture as we can of where we expect guys to go. And then, we see what happens. We are about a month away from the draft. It's always a fun time. Things are heating up, and we're past the first initial round of free agency. So we're going to go back through and evaluate team needs and figure out what that looks like. And then, we'll do another mock in a few weeks, and we'll go from there. Like I said, RotoHeat.com, RookieDraftGuide.com. You get our rankings, you get our player evals, ratings, video, all the fun things. I would encourage you guys to become a Patreon over there in Rookie Draft Guide and RotoHeat. They're combined. So we will get you all sorts of specific content. We are working hard to make sure that we give you value, provide you value. I don't know.
We do.
We work hard. We got a team full of guys that are busting their tails, working real hard, getting you the best content out there. So thank you guys, as always, for hanging out with us. I do apologize again for kind of the goofy technical difficulties. As we continue to upgrade and try to make these streams as professional and exciting as possible for you, things are going to look a little different. We're going to keep trying some things. So stick with us. Give us your feedback and comments. I and Rick and some of the guys are monitoring the YouTube chat and the channel to keep up to date and make sure that we're hearing what you're all saying. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Kraig. We love you all. We'll talk to you again tomorrow night. You'll have to stick around to find out what we're doing tomorrow. Come back tomorrow night, 9:30, and we'll see you.
See ya.